shovel and you replace the handle a lot of times, so it's still a shovel, but the cottage to some extent has been replaced. It's still in the same form, but it's obviously been modernised and upgraded over time. It's been in my family for 122 years or so. My great-grandmother bought it, and the story behind that is she became a widow. Her husband was killed actually on Hill Street, which is just handy to the cottage, and a collection was taken up for her, including a donation by the Premier at the time of a guinea. She then was able to take this little bit of money and able to use it to, improve her prospects. Because at that time it was pretty harsh, being on your own, her husband having died. And so then she actually managed to purchase that house and some other houses around Thornton. She was illiterate, so when you look at the documents, she actually signed them with a cross at the time. So that's the kind of family story. It then went down to, I presume, my grandfather or grandmother, and then it went down to my father, and he's passed away, and it's now within the family, but it's at the stage where we're now selling it.
That's Paul Dignan. That's the owner of that small home. It has a rateable valuation of $700,000. It's for sale by tender, closing on April 1st.
$700,000. It's beautiful. It's a gorgeous place. I couldn't live in it because it doesn't have room for books, but it is a very beautiful little space.
Yeah, it shows the value of housing investment, dare I say.
Yeah.
You could put it another way as well.
Yeah.
I suppose so.
We're coming up to the news at 5, but every Monday we have a profile of small Kiwi business, and today we're talking about a business using the Japanese art of kintsugi, I hope I'm saying that right, which means mend with gold. Rochelle Woods from Kintsugi NZ joins me on the line now from Auckland. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Is it kintsugi?
It is, that's right.
What is it exactly?
Okay, so kintsugi is basically ancient Japanese ornamental repair form, and it's basically mending with gold or some other precious metal.
So if you break a vase or something, then you piece it back together?
That's right, yeah.
With actual gold, or when you say precious metal, what else?
Or silver or something like that. Most kintsugi artists these days don't use real gold, although I can, but using a brass-based gold powder or something like that just makes it a lot more affordable for the average person.
Where did you learn how to do it, Rochelle?
I am self-taught. YouTube videos.
And how do you do it? It must have some glue in there somewhere.
Well, traditionally, I use urushi lacquer, which can only be bought from Japan.
It's a wonderful thing for people who've got something they love and they've broken it, and to fix it like that, because they look spectacular when they've been repaired.
They do, absolutely.
It's also about doing away with our throwaway culture. Yeah. Things are being thrown away all the time that actually still have value and beauty. And I looked at some of the things on your website. They look really great.
Do people bring you broken things, Rochelle, or do you actually find a plate and smash it and glue it back together with gold?
I get asked that question a lot. I do try and do repairs first and foremost, and I scour second-hand stores and look for seconds and that sort of thing, and I try to use those where possible. But I do actually do custom gifts and that sort of thing as well, in which case that would require me, in most cases, to break things.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I've become skilled in the art of breaking.
It reminds me of because some of the things that look more beautiful that I've seen on your website than they would have before they were broken and put back together. It's like the Leonard Cohen song, there's and everything. That's how the light gets in. That things are more beautiful once they're imperfect. Absolutely.
Well, that's a lot of the meaning behind kintsugi, is that in terms of a human life, there's beauty in the brokenness and the celebration in the scars, and that's what kintsugi is all about.
Wonderful. Thanks very much for joining us, Rochelle.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And you can look that up on facebook.com, Kintsugi NZ. That's the panel for today. My thanks to writer and comedian Rochelle A Court.
Pleasure to be here. Ngā mihi.
And consulting and business and trade commentator. Is that all right? Stephen Jacoby.
Sounds great to me. Thanks very much. All the best, New Zealand.
Wallace Chapman will be back tomorrow, and Lisa Owen has Checkpoint next. Good afternoon.
Whakarongo mai koe ke te reorangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, Corrections is forced to apologise for its degrading and inhumane treatment of female prisoners. But what's actually going to change in our jails? The Aussie travel bubble has just bounced down the road, with the Prime Minister announcing a date for a quarantine-free travel. Is the Sky Path, a cycleway over the Harbour Bridge, a pie?
Findings of Judge McNaughton regarding the treatment of several women at Auckland Region Women's Correctional Facility. I sought advice from the Attorney General and further information from the Prison Inspectorate. I have received that information from the Chief Inspector, and it's fair to say that I'm not happy with what I've read. So I have directed Corrections to make a number of changes immediately. First of all, Corrections needs to accept the recommendations of the Chief Inspector. There needs to be a detailed plan outlining how Corrections will address systemic issues raised at Auckland Region Women's Correctional Facility. There needs to be an urgent overhaul of the maximum security classification for women, as well as development of management plans and review of all our women's prisons. It's inappropriate for women in prison to be treated as if their needs were the same as male prisoners. There needs to be a review of the Prison Operations Manual and the Corrections regulations, in particular the areas highlighted by the Chief Inspector's report, to make sure that they do align with Hawkeye Rangi. And there also needs to be additional training for frontline staff on the use of force, on segregation management of difficult situations. And I have to say here that I believe that the frontline staff who had to deal with the situation on a daily basis, that in fact they were let down by the system higher up. There needed to be a time when somebody said, look, what we're doing isn't working and we need to look at the situation and change our processes and our practices. And finally, I'd like an external reference group led by the Chief Inspector to look at the complaints system. I expect that the group would comprise of prison advocates, prisoners themselves, and also experts within the system. Now it is appropriate that Corrections makes amends and apologises to the women affected. And also, as the Minister of Corrections responsible for the system that let these women down, it is appropriate as well that I apologise to the woman. So, questions? There was a systemic breakdown. I just believe that the management of the woman was unacceptable, it was inappropriate, and that they were let down. Their needs weren't being met. There was like I said earlier, there had to come a time when people just took a step back and said, the way we are managing these women is not working. What can we do differently? What can we do better? And that never happened.
What do you say to those people?
At the appropriate time, I'll apologise. I believe we need to make amends. And Corrections needs to apologise as well. That's just one step into setting the situation right. Well, I had sought assurances, and I had been given assurances that they had acted lawfully, and that's why I sought more information from the Chief Inspector. Like I say, I've received the interim report from the Chief Inspector. I'm not happy with what's in the report, and it's Well, when things go wrong, when a mistake is made, corrections needs to put up their hand and admit it and fix the situation, and that's what I've directed them to do. The most appropriate thing is that it's been acknowledged that corrections, their treatment, their management of these women was wrong, and now it is time to set that right. I sought assurances that the management of these women was appropriate, but given the interim report from the Chief Inspector, I believe that the things that I've outlined, those points that I've outlined, weren't up to scratch, weren't up to the standard, the expectation that I have, and it's now time to put it right.
Is that concerning that, Mr. Crown, because in part of your portfolio, you were given assurances that those assurances were right. So does it need to be changed in the direction?
Look, I have total faith in the CE of Corrections. He's as upset about this as I am. It's about making sure that the processes and the systems within Corrections actually meet the needs of the people that they're charged to manage. We'll work out the best form that may take and the right wording to make sure that it is appropriate. But certainly, I believe it is appropriate that as the Minister responsible for the system, that I extend an apology to the woman affected.
Yeah, you're also calling for a large review of the way women were at the country managed in prison. Can you tell us why you're
Yeah, it's important that the management of women is appropriate to women, and the system has basically been designed around managing men, and I just don't think in this day and age, and it's probably never been appropriate, that women and their needs have been treated as if they were men.
So what needs to change?
Yeah, well, that's what will be looked at to make sure, and I'm very firm that the female prisoners themselves actually need to be engaged in that process so that their needs can be articulated and that Corrections makes the appropriate changes to meet their needs. But it's certainly not appropriate to treat women as if they were male prisoners. Well, I think some of the practices that have come out that the judge described speak for themselves. I think that. Look, I just think that we need to have a good look at the way that these women have been treated and other women, and that we make sure that we don't keep making the same mistakes.
In your letter, you quoted Professor McIntosh, and it stuck with you in terms of the conflict that these guards have between humanity and being prison guards. Does that point to you as some kind of cultural issue within corrections, where those two kind of pull apart?
Yes, I do believe that is a cultural issue, that for someone to say the human in me thought I should behave in one way, but the corrections officer in me believed I need to act in another way. I think that corrections officers need to behave in a human way. Now, let me say that corrections officers do a fantastic job around the country. They are dealing with some of the most difficult people in New Zealand. They have an incredibly tough job. So this isn't a criticism of corrections officers, it is a criticism of the system that let corrections officers down. I'm very concerned. I expect that when cameras should be used, that they are used, that they are on, that it's possible to see what went on, that that it shouldn't be blocked in any way, if I can use that word. And, I think it's important that we can see what actually goes on and corrections can see. I mean, it's about also knowing what they can do differently, being able to review the footage and making sure that, what they do next time is appropriate. Yeah, I again sought assurances that strip searches of women, they were being treated in accordance with the Corrections Act. So, despite what we've all just discussed, I have to have faith in my corrections team that the information I'm getting is accurate. But certainly there are times when all prisoners go through strip searches, but it must be done in accordance with the Act.
What do you mean by urgent overhaul of the maximum security classification for women?
So those women with maximum security, this is what I'm talking about a woman not being treated as if they were maximum security male prisoners. And I think it's important that we differentiate and that we look at what is appropriate for for the management of women in prisons.
We've heard from opposition parties today that the Hokai strategy isn't enough, and to see room for transformation change that needs to be an overhaul, for example, like Mr. Orange, are you expecting that level of change within corrections?
Well, Hokairangi is that level of change. It is a 5-year strategy. You're not going to see the benefits that you'll see in 5 years in just over 18 months. So we need to wait until the 5 years is up to see the changes. And it's also, you don't just launch a strategy and snap your fingers and then everybody is implementing and bought into it. So there's a lot of work still to be done, but it's on the right track. Previous to this government, there was no Māori strategy. And often we see Māori strategies are little strategies in the corner while an overarching strategy occurs. Well, Hokairangi is the Māori strategy, is the overarching strategy for corrections. It is about overall systemic change in corrections. There are a lot of positives coming out of it. We've got the Māori pathways. In fact, and we're looking to implement a Māori pathway in Christchurch Women's Prison. But you look at the statistics, we said that we would safely reduce the prison population by 30% over 15 years. We've done that, we've achieved a 20% reduction in just 3.5 years. We haven't changed any settings, we haven't changed any laws, we've just looked for bottlenecks in the system. Our double bunking numbers have been reduced by 38%. Our Māori numbers have been reduced by 16%. It's over 800 fewer Māori in prison now than when we became government. But if you look at the 16% reduction in Māori numbers and the 20% reduction in overall prison numbers, we can see that what we're doing at this stage is benefiting non-Māori more than it's benefiting Māori. But we've identified that and we can work on it. And that's why we have Māori pathways. That's why we have Hokairangi. We have made some really good progress in the last 3.5 years. There has been a total turnaround in the management since, I think, April last year. There is new management, and I'm certainly hopeful that that new management implements the changes that we've made. In fact, since February of last year, the situation that occurred previously in regards to the management of these women has totally changed. The prison that it was in February of 2020 isn't the prison that it is now because of the changes that they've made. Yeah, and the prison manager, I anticipate that he'll follow the direction that I've given, and we'll look to enhance and refine and improve what is going on in our women's prisons. I mean, one of the other points I want to make in terms of what we've done for women's prisons, when the numbers of women in prison peaked at over 800. Now we have around just over 500, maybe 550 women in our prisons. So, things that we have been doing are working in reducing the numbers of women in prison as well. So there are a lot of good things, and it has come about because of the good work of corrections officers on the front line. So, because of the nature of prisons, when things go wrong, they go pretty wrong. But it's about not whether they go wrong, it's about putting your hand up, identifying the problem and fixing it, and that's what we're doing. If that's appropriate. So we need to make amends. An apology is one thing we said, access to counselling, settlement of some sort. But I also think their ability to engage in the changes that will be needed, for them to have input into what we need to do differently and better to meet the needs of women, I think that's also an important part of making amends to them.
And there's concerns around, whether or not these women should have been with pounds. What's happening with, are they looking at that?
Yeah, and that was one of the issues I raised, that I've directed corrections to look at, is the use of segregation and the management of difficult prisoners. So that'll be part of the direction that corrections will go in. Yeah, I would anticipate, well, I expect that is going to happen. Got to make sure that that if someone is in the pound, it's because they should be there, and that all the rules, have been followed for them to be in there. All good? Thank you.